It's certainly not harder to go from 100K to $1 million than it is from 10 to 100. But it always does require a change in focus.
Hey, podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guide, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Okay, it's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guide. It's time for episode 53 of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, where you'll discover tactics and strategies to increase your email profits by 25 to 100% in 90 days or less without spending more on advertising. Today, I'll be talking to Perry Marshall. Now, if you've been in the online space for any amount of time, you're going to know who Perry Marshall is. He is the bona fide expert in Google AdWords. He has a best-selling book on it. He's also a author of a book on Facebook advertising. But the reason I got him on the show today was to talk about another book of his called 80/20 Sales and Marketing, which absolutely changed the way I think about business, marketing, sales, even my to-do list. Okay, and since reading this book, I'm working less, but I'm making more money. It's the coolest thing in the world. It's the ultimate goal of the business owner, from what I understand, is to work less but make more money, right? It's all about leverage, and that's what this book's about, and that's why I got Perry Marshall on the show, and that's what we talk about today. So it's not specifically about email marketing. However, the ideas we talk about in this podcast, you can apply to email marketing, you can apply to your traffic campaigns, you can apply to everything. It's going to produce some incredible results over time. You're going to have to listen to the interview to really understand what I'm talking about. But tune out, stay tuned in, and you're going to love it. Okay? To get the show notes for this episode of the Email Marketing Podcast, go to themcmethod.com/53. Now, I've got no 5-star reviews to read out. I thought I'd keep it quick. But if you want to make my day, if you want to spread the word and be an evangelist for the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, go to iTunes and search for the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast. Leave me a review. Tell me what you think. If there are any guests you'd like me to interview, put them in there. And you put a huge smile on my face when that review goes live, and I will read it out on the show. Now, instead of listener questions, I thought what I'd talk about today real quick before we get into this interview is McMasters. Now, I haven't mentioned McMasters on the podcast, so first I'll give you a quick little rundown of what it is, and then I'll tell you 2 things that are going on in there right now that you might want to check out. McMasters is my new community. Basically, it's a private community where you can find the McIntyre Method, which is a 4-week program for how to write autoresponders, and a bunch of other products. There's a video course on how to write stories that sell, how to write pages that convert is another one. Exclusive interviews. There's a bunch of stuff. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all that right now. You can go check it out at themcmethod.com/McMasters. But basically, the way to think about it is it's a private community where you can find all the products that I've created up until now and any products I'll create in the future. Okay? So, 2 things I want to mention, and then we'll get into this interview with Perry Marshall. Number 1 is one of the things that members get in there, I'm doing like a private podcast, bit of an exclusive interview each month, which I'm playing around with. Now, the first one I did with Andre Chaperone of Autoresponder Madison Ben Settle on the same call, which was lots of fun and very interesting. I've never done that before. It was a bit of a 3-way kind of call. The whole thing's recorded, and we talked about one of the most interesting parts was Andre's soap opera sequence strategy versus Ben Settle's daily email strategy, which is a much more aggressive strategy. So we talked about that, and that's one of the things you can find in McMasters. And the other thing I wanted to mention is just a cool thread that I set up the other day that really made me laugh, and it's making some of the other members crack up as well. Based on Michael Silk, a podcast episode that went live about 10 episodes ago, so almost 3 months ago, with Michael Silk on how to write fun emails. So the idea was that you'd go to say the Huffington Post, go to the weird news section and use that to come up with some ideas for emails. Now, here are some examples that I came up with. How to laugh at a robber with a meat cleaver. Right, that's a subject line. Another one was, why I hate bathtub tax. Another one was, is your penis fit for a museum? Right? Now, you can't send these emails every single day because they're not going to work if you do it all the time. However, you can have a lot of fun with them. Let's say if I sent you an email with, is your penis fit for a museum? How could you not open that? You'd have to open it, right? And then basically what I could do is just tell the story from Huffington Post, and then I would transition into a pitch. It's very easy to do, and that's the sort of thing you're going to learn inside McMasters. So that's in a thread called Weird Emails That Eliminate Writer's Block. And the reason they eliminate writer's block is that you don't need to, you just go to the Huffington Post. You can go to any sort of news site and find this weird emails section and use that as your inspiration. Okay, so I just wanted to mention those 2 things that have been happening this week at Rockin' My World. But that's it for that. Let's get into this interview with Mr. Perry Marshall. It's John McIntyre here, the autoresponder guy. I'm here with Perry Marshall. Now, Perry is the world's top expert on online marketing, especially pay-per-click marketing with Google AdWords, with Facebook. And, we're just chatting. He does a whole range of stuff from the paid traffic to the email marketing. He's got email copywriting products. He's got stuff on the strategy and the 80-20 principle, and a whole bunch of different things. Several books on AdWords, on Facebook ads, on split testing, all these different stuff. So it's really, really good. I just actually read one of his books, 80-20 Sales and Marketing. I read it a couple of months ago, and I've recommended it to I don't know how many friends, because I seriously reckon it was one of the best books I've read, probably in the last year, about that. And I remember thinking while I was reading it that the ideas in this book are going to make me a millionaire one day. Felt a bit like escaping the Matrix. You'll see why in just a minute. So that's that. But first, I want to welcome Perry. Perry, how are you going today?
I'm great. It's a beautiful day, and I'm glad to be talking to you. And nice to meet a guy who knows the power of autoresponders. It's still a little bit of a best-kept secret still. So
it is.
I'm glad that we're talking.
Cool, man. Cool. I'm actually blown away by how many, outside the internet marketing space, a lot of people have no idea. Business owners have no idea what an autoresponder even is.
Yeah, you have to be an internet marketer to really know, and I think a lot of us do, but yeah, 90% of people out there, some of them may have heard of it, and it doesn't mean a thing to them. So, yeah, there's a lot of ignorance yet to stamp out.
Before we get into, tell the listener a bit about who you are. I've given you a quick little intro, but maybe you can give them a bit more on who you are, what you do, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm a guy who got laid off from my engineering job when my wife was 3 months pregnant with our first kid, and I ended up in sales. I couldn't find the engineering job I was looking for without moving away, and I didn't want to do that. Well, I'll do sales. Those guys aren't very smart. I think I'll I'll whoop up on them. I'll show them. And 2 years later, after a lot of bologna sandwiches and ramen soup and overdraft notices and all that stuff, I was like, man, this is a lot harder than I thought. And it was even hard if you had a really nice boss and you worked in a good environment. It was still brutal. It's like, get up every day and open the manufacturer's directory and start pounding the phone and get some appointments. And, it was brutal. So I got fired from my first sales job after trying really, really, really hard for 2 years. But around that time, I discovered direct marketing. I heard Dan Kennedy at a seminar that I went to, and he was talking about direct response advertising, which, today is pretty common. It was very definitely the redheaded stepchild of advertising back then. And I found that direct marketers are kind of like engineers, and I could understand what they were saying. When somebody finally started explaining direct marketing, what actually started to make sense to me was direct mail. And now the internet was pretty new at that time, and I was beginning to use it, but it was a sales letter needs to have this sort of a structure to it. You've got to grab the person's attention. You've got to draw them in with a story that talks about their pain. And eventually you're going to get around to explaining how your problem solves it. I'm like, okay, that's something I hadn't really understood. I would go into a sales situation and I would just start showing people stuff and saying stuff and asking questions and just kind of riffing, okay? And my riffing just didn't work very well. There's just so many things I didn't understand. All of a sudden it started to click in place. So I took this other job, and we had a website, and we sold to people who used the internet, and it all started to click. And after a few years of that, it was a reasonably successful sales career at that point. And I said to myself, wow, what if I actually got good at this stuff? Because right now I'm just I'm functional with it, okay? I'm functional, and that's great. But what if I got really good? How much would that pay off? And so, that kind of leads to where I am now. And, I got a touch of attention deficit disorder. So that's probably why I got my fingers in so many pies. And, you're a copywriter, and good copywriters, I find, I barely know you, okay? You contacted my office and you passed the smell test, and my staff checked you out, and I checked you out, and looks good. Okay, you're the autoresponder guy, but I can probably make some pretty accurate predictions about you. You're a guy who I am going to guess, is endlessly fascinated with about 900 different things. And the only way that you can not go stir crazy is to have another new project you can sink your teeth into every day that takes you into some other, hitherto unexplored corner of the universe, right?
Yeah.
If that sounds like something you'd like, well, maybe you should be a freelance marketer. Fair enough, John? Is that good?
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. That's the endless struggle.
Your family, your school teachers didn't know what to do with you. And what is the matter with this kid? Why won't he sit still? Why does he fidget all the time? And, if he would only apply, he has so much potential. If he would only apply himself to his schoolwork, instead of chasing caterpillars with magnifying glasses.
It's funny. I remember for a long time, I looked at these kind of things of darting off in a million different directions at once as though it was a bad thing. And as I've met more entrepreneurs and more marketers, I've seen that that's like a prerequisite personality function to be successful at business. If you don't have that, it's really hard to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. In fact, I was on the phone yesterday with one of my, close marketing friends, and he goes, and he's hunting for the word. He goes, I'm slightly autistic. He goes, and I read this book, and it said, I'm constantly checking things, checking this, checking that, checking the other thing. Well, that's actually a form of autism. It seems to be really healthy for me. It works. And, I've got these clients, and I got to watch their stats and make sure their websites are working right. And I guess I kind of like him. All right. So we all get our diagnosis, and we harness our dysfunction.
Yep.
And, frankly, whatever dysfunction you have, even if it's borderline personality disorder, you can find a way, some kind of career that's going to put it to good use. So flow with it.
That's the interesting part. I reckon they call them personality disorders. I wonder why. I think sometimes they're only disorders because they don't fit into most people's idea of the way we should all live. But if you can find the right way to apply that.
The people that invent the labels are just trying to displace the attention away from their own disorder onto somebody. That's what's really going on. So.
Well, technically, if we were all the same in terms of business and everyone was an entrepreneur, then all those weird people would have disorders because they only wanted to focus on one thing instead of a million things.
Well, really, in all seriousness, the most important thing in marketing is having a USP, a unique selling proposition. It even took me a year or two to figure that out. And I didn't really figure it out until the direct marketers taught it to me. Okay. But eccentric people come up with USPs a lot easier than normal ones do. And so if you were always eccentric and you considered it a curse, well, here it's a blessing.
Absolutely. That is a great place to seg right into this idea of 80-20 sales and marketing, because basically you've got a million things. We all want to go in a million directions at once in our business. But the whole principle of this book, 80-20, the reason why I found it so valuable is I read The 4-Hour Workweek maybe 5 years ago, something like that. And Tim Ferriss mentions the 80-20 principle in that book. I was like, that sounds kind of cool. It's a little bit helpful. But I thought I want 100% of the results. And the way he seemed to put it is I'd have to do 20%. I could do 20% of the effort and only get 80%. But I wanted to get 100%. What happened with your book is that it kind of made this idea click that, hang on, why can't I just scale back, just do 20% to get 80%, and then not only that, double the amount of investment I put in that 20%, which then makes my output 160%. And then when that clicked, it's like, hang on, out of all those million things that I could be doing, all I have to do is identify the 20%, those small things, and just double, triple, or whatever my investment of time and energy and focus into those areas. There'll be exponential improvements over time in the business.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. And the thing that people don't understand about 80-20 is that when you find a way to get the insignificant 80% taken care of, sometimes it does have to be taken care of. There's some things you can't ignore. There could be 78 things that make your website work, and any one of them could make it fail, right? So you have to have all 78. And there is a sense where, there does have to be a 100%. But if you can get the 80 taken care of and focus on the 20 and make space, you will always find that there's another place you can go where your time is even more valuable. in the book, it's called the 80-20 curve. And you can graph 80-20 and it looks like this, kind of like this exponential growth curve, except it's more than that. It's more than exponential. It's really mind-bending when you get down into it. But, when you climb that curve, you find there's always territory ahead of you that you're still not doing. And so you just kind of have to trust the process and understand that pretty much as a law of physics, that those higher realms are always there. There might be occasional exceptions, but for the most part, it's true. And so what you come to understand is that the results that people get, the incomes that people make, the sales they create, all of that stuff is not in additions and increments. It's in multiples and powers of 10. It's not $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year, 70, 100, 110, 120. No, it's more like 10,000, 100,000, million, 10 million.
Mm-hmm. I like this, the way you framed it up there, and what was kind of running through my head when I read the book was that it was a great metaphor for entrepreneurship, whereas when you're getting started, you start off and you're trying to make $1,000 a month. But while you're trying to make 1,000, you've still got this idea in your head that it's going to take, once you get to 1,000, it's going to take the same amount of time to get to 2,000. And it's really hard to shake that feeling or that idea in your head. But once you get to 1,000, all of a sudden, you get to 3 or 4 with quite a lot faster and a lot easier than it was to get to 1,000. And then you take that 3 and 4 and you get to, say, 10 or 20. And then so it seems like entrepreneurship is there's this definition. It's on Wikipedia from some French guy. I hope that's not a bad that I don't even know this guy's name. Might be real famous. But the idea is that you're moving resources from a lower area of yield to a higher area of yield. So what we're doing is everyone's got their own 80-20 in their own life right now. If they just execute on those tasks on that thing, they'll get result in the fastest way possible. But then as soon as they've done that, there'll be like another playing field and then another playing field and then another playing field. And every time they run that script, it's almost like a script on a computer. Every time you run that 80-20 script, you get bigger and bigger and bigger results.
Yes, and in fact, I've said for years, it is easier to get from $100,000 a year to $1 million than it is to get from 10,000 to 100. For most people, the real barrier is getting from 10,000 a year to 100,000, or in monthly sales, $1,000 a month to 10,000 a month. That's where the competition is really thick, and then you get a breakthrough. It's certainly not harder to go from 100K to $1 million than it is from 10 to 100. And people don't understand that, but it always does require a change in focus. What the exact thing that got you to 100K a year is not going to get you to $1 million. You're going to be doing very different things.
Right. So it's kind of like the level of thinking that got you to where you are today is different
That's right.
from the sort of thinking that's going to get you to where you want to be.
Right.
So what's the...
Right.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
Because a lot of business owners have heard this. I mean, I heard it in the 4-Hour Workweek 5 years ago. It took another 5 years for it to really click. So it wasn't sort of saying that I understood it, but I didn't do anything about it or really think about it with any sort of proper, focus. Whereas, this year, since I've read the book, every day when I wake up, it's becoming more of a habit now. But I'm thinking, what can I eliminate from this list that just isn't really going to matter much at all? And it turns out there's a lot of stuff that I've been doing that I don't really need to do. Or I can just hire, I've hired one person, hiring another person next week. And it's all because of starting to think like this. So what have you seen in your work with business owners that some of the biggest barriers that stop people from thinking like this, and how to overcome them?
The way that I overcame it was starting to see all the things on my list to do every day as being on an exponential scale. So there's $10 an hour tasks, and there's $100 an hour tasks, and there's $1,000 an hour tasks, and $10,000 an hour tasks. In fact, I have a chart on page 119 that describes, typical, there's a $10 column and a $100 column and a $1,000 an hour column. And it tells you what those things typically are and what you typically earn from those efforts. And so let's say that you have a to-do list with 111 things, which, for a week, there might be 111. Well, 100 of those things are worth $10 an hour, and 10 of them are worth $100 an hour, and one is worth $1,000 an hour. That's kind of how it is. And so, if you know that 1/10 of your tasks are 10 times as valuable, if you know that 1% of your tasks are 100 times as valuable, all of a sudden it just completely shifts your understanding of what's important and what's not. And what I find is a lot of people everybody who's really good at anything is a perfectionist in some sense, but most of us misapply our perfectionism. And we sit and we polish these little turds, and it doesn't actually make any difference whether most of these things are done really well or frankly done sort of lousy, as long as they get done somehow by somebody. Whereas if you focus your perfectionism on, a few things, you think about it, think of bands and songs and stuff like that. A band in their entire career, they'll probably have 5 or 10 hits. What that means is there's only 5 or 10 songs that absolutely had to be perfect.
Yep.
You have an album and you get 1 or 2 hits and the other songs are definitely not hits. Well, those other songs, sure, it's good for the fans and the people that buy the album for those songs to be done well, but it's really the hit songs that need to be perfect. Now, what I found is you can't predict the hit song before you even record them. Maybe you can, but usually you can't. You have to get things to some level of acceptability before you can tell which one's going to take off. But I bet you by the time they at least had the basic tracks laid down, most of the bands had a pretty good idea which 2 or 3 songs were going to, be popular and which ones weren't. Right. And so you have to be very selective about your perfectionism, and then also understand that there are some things, there's a just few things that almost couldn't be perfect enough. It's like you could just continue to make them more and more perfect, and you will continue to make exponentially more results from them.
What's an example of something like that?
Well, I think a big one is how products get simplified. I think the highest form of perfection and perfectionism is the kind of perfectionism that Steve Jobs applied. Okay, so Steve Jobs, he wanted products to be, they needed to be functional, and they needed to do the things that they're supposed to do, but they also needed to do it with utmost simplicity and ease. And so I think a lot of us do is, we get into business and we finally eventually figure out how to make it work. But then what we try to do, we try to become more successful by making what we sell more complicated. And I think, that's okay, and it's kind of normal, but the real breakthroughs are when you figure out how to simplify something to a tremendous degree. Okay, so like the smartphone is a tremendous simplifier because you need a guitar tuner? Download an app. You need a metronome? Download an app. You need a map? Download an app. And it all fits in your pocket. And the phone only has 2 buttons. Right? It's got that little round one at the bottom, and it's got the power button at the top. Okay, that is extreme simplicity. Extreme simplicity. And so I think what everybody needs to be doing, so one of my favorite phrases in marketing is sell results, not procedures. And I stole it from Herschel Gordon Lewis. Now, if you apply sell results, not procedures to everything you sell, it changes the definition of what you sell. Okay, so coffee. Coffee shops thought they were selling coffee. Starbucks, 20 years ago, whenever they kind of, caught their stride, they said, we're going to sell a $2 luxury and a luxury experience that everybody can afford. And they made a Starbucks store into a little taste of luxury. Okay, now I like Starbucks. I like going there. I went there yesterday. Why do I like it? Well, I like the music. I like the atmosphere. I like the coffee. I like the caffeine buzz. And I like the fact that I can go sit there with my notebook or my laptop and I can do some work. And it's a very pleasant thing. Think how different that is from going to McDonald's, where for the same amount of money, I get a meal, I mean, McDonald's is remarkable too. Their food's not healthy and I don't really like it, but it's remarkable that you can go and for $4, you can get a lunch and the kids think it tastes great. That's for sure. But Starbucks is selling you a hamburger McDonald's is selling a hamburger. Starbucks is selling you an experience. They are selling you a result, not a procedure. Starbucks does not sell coffee. Okay, so I don't care if you sell medical equipment or if you can say what is the end result that the person actually wants. Nobody who bought a drill wanted a drill, they wanted a hole. If you say I am in the hole making business instead of I'm in the drill business, that will always lead you to solve problems better and more simply than everybody else is. And there's no end to how much you can do this.
Right.
Because there's no end to problems in the world. You can do it and do it and do it. So, the 80-20 curve, it goes up and up and up and it never stops. It just goes higher and higher. For me, what the 80-20 curve is, it's a rational reason to have faith that there's always another opportunity, that there's always a higher ladder that you can climb, okay? And I think all entrepreneurs, all business owners also need to know there's no end to the problems that they can solve. The well of human desires is bottomless. How high is up? It doesn't stop.
Right.
There is no limit. Compared to 200 years ago, everybody on the planet just about is wealthy. Compared to now, the people 200 years from now, they will consider us to be unfortunate. All those poor people,
with iPhones and computers and all that stuff. So
that's right.
Just to we'll wrap it up right here, but just to summarize that, it's like saying you're not in the Facebook advertising business, you're in the make more money business.
Well, yes. And, everybody's in the make more money business. And if you don't have an identity, something that people can hang their hat on and a USP, then you're still dead in the water. But regardless of what your exact, unique, individual USP is, there is still the bottom line that, my customers want to make more money. Absolutely. And I have to be in the business of that. And if I start thinking that I'm in the business of click-through rates and impressions and all these funky little techniques that I get enamored with, I'm going to stagnate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're in the get more clients business.
Yeah. I see what you mean. So you've got to have the USP, whereas, I'm the autoresponder guy, you're the traffic guy. But then under that, the second layer of that is, I'm this guy, but I'm really here just to help you make more sales. But I'm going to do it under the guise of email or traffic or whatever that happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up right here. I know you're going to get going. But before we go, give the listener a heads up about where they can go to learn more about you or the book or anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, so if I could just pick one thing to encourage people to go do, it would be read the 80-20 sales and marketing book and read the whole thing. I wrote this for two kinds of people. I wrote this for the guy who is just like I was 20 years ago when I got fired from my first sales job and was scraping change out of the car seats in order to buy lunch. Okay, but I also wrote it for, the guy who's running a $50 million company. And literally the book, it will change your perspective. And John, you can agree or disagree, but I think it will actually alter your perspective about what's important in sales and marketing in a major way. It will make a major shift. And I have a very interesting offer on my website. If you go to sell8020.com, SELL8020.com, I've got an offer and I'll sell you my book for $7. It's a penny plus $6.99 shipping if you're in the US, or shipping is double if you're outside the US, but less money than Amazon, less money than the bookstore. I'll ship it to you. Read the book from cover to cover. And why am I doing this? I mean, I'm taping dollar bills to this book. But here's why I'm doing this. I found out, did the numbers and did the math, 80-20, right? Well, 78.6% of the people who buy that book don't buy anything else from me. And you know what? 21.4% do. and they go on to be raving fans and great customers. And I'm willing to tape dollar bills to that book for the 20% who step up and go, hey, I really like that. And they're like John McIntyre, like, oh, I really like this book. I'm going to pay attention to this guy. I think it will change your life. And so you can go to sell8020.com. You can buy it for $7. Even if you have to scrape the $7 out of your car seats and skip lunch, you should buy this book because it will change your life.
All right, I'll have a link to that in the show notes at themcmethod.com. I can highly recommend the book. It does produce a huge change, a huge shift in your thinking, so no arguments there at all. Perry, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, John. It was great to talk to you today.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing and much more.